Welcome to Chiefs Live, everyone, here at One Arrowhead Drive, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers. Josh Looney with you, as always. Another jam-packed show in a crazy offseason for the Chiefs. Voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, will be joining us to talk about all things Chiefs, specifically answering the question that was asked this weekend by the NFL Network. Can the Chiefs win with Matt Cassel? Can the Kansas City Chiefs win in 2012 with Matt Cassel as their quarterback? We'll look at what the NFL Network said, and we'll also talk to Mitch Holthus and debate that fact. Is Cassel a guy that can win games for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2012? We'll also take a look at a prospect a lot of you guys are interested in, and really a guy who's intrigued me and pretty much anyone that's associated with the Chiefs and knows this roster and knows the needs of this team. We'll take a look at Dontari Poe, the nose tackle out of Memphis. It seems a lot of mock drafts like him going to the Chiefs at number 11. The Chiefs certainly have a need at nose tackle. Right now, there's 3 players at nose tackle. Amon Gordon re-signs with the club, a versatile defensive lineman, but more of a backup player, very important to the Chiefs last season, however. You also have Jarrell Poe, and really a guy we don't know a whole lot about, a 6th-round pick last year, used as a compensatory selection. He's a guy who only played 7 defensive snaps all last year, and the third man of that position was Anthony Toribio. All of last season on the practice squad, played just 64 defensive snaps for the Chiefs in 2010. Chiefs short on experience, definitely a need still at nose tackle as the team enters free agency and the draft. Let's take a look at today's Arrow headlines, see what all is in store for our Chiefs Live before we get this motor cooking. Here on today's Arrow headlines, as we look, national media flip-flops on Matt Cassel. Oh boy, do they ever. This weekend I got a lot of tweets from you guys asking me, do you see what the Chiefs are saying about Brian Daboll and about Matt Cassel? They don't think that the Chiefs can win with either one of these guys. We'll debate that fact, but we'll also look at an interesting video that was just 18 months ago on NFL Network. Well, I'll save what they were asking then after we see what they said this week. And is Poe the best option at number 11? Those of you who have watched the show know I liked Dontari Poe, but you also know my draft man crush this year is David DeCastro, the offensive lineman out of Stanford. Is Poe the guy for the Chiefs at 11, though? Because a lot of people, especially media pundits, think that it's all but written that if he's there, the Chiefs would take Poe. At number 11, I even read somewhere that the Chiefs would trade up to take Poe in one draft prediction. So we'll talk all about Dontari Poe. Rule change proposals. Lots of stuff going down this week in Palm Beach, Florida at the Breakers at the 2012 NFL annual meeting. There's a lot of proposals on the board. We'll take a look at some of the ones that would impact the game the most. And, of course, your fix of the voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Holthus, will be joining us here later on in the program. Yesterday, we also found out the Chiefs have no compensatory draft picks. Not a big surprise. I'll get in with Mitch a little bit on how that process works. Essentially, it's a formula based off of salary, free agent signings, and level of performance in 2011, the year before. So compensatory picks are essentially extra draft picks for losing better free agents or more free agents than you did the year before. Not a surprise the Chiefs did not get any compensatory picks this year because their acquisitions last free agency outweighed their losses. The Chiefs essentially just lost 2 players to unrestricted free agency last year, both defensive linemen. It was Ron Edwards to the Carolina Panthers and Sean Smith to the Tennessee Titans. Ron Edwards, of course, was injured in training camp, did not play a single snap all of last season with a torn tricep. Sean Smith had a rather underwhelming 2011 season, started just 6 games for the Titans, 25 tackles, 1 sack. Really lost his starting job halfway through the season as well. After the year, said he played out of shape. It's what Sean Smith told the media in Tennessee. So not a whole lot of production from the free agents that got away from the Chiefs last year. But then you look at the guys in-house, a lot of significant contributions in playing time, which, let's think, it's mathematically. Steve Breaston was a great pickup for the Chiefs last year. He factored into the free agent formula. You also had LaRon McClain, who played in all 16 games, factor in. You also had Amon Gordon, who we talked about, a kind of a surprise addition to the free agent class. He factors in. And, of course, I tweeted this out last week or yesterday, Savvy Piscatelli. And people say, well, Piscatelli, how does he? I understand a lot of people aren't big Savvy Piscatelli fans, but mathematically, Piscatelli played in all 16 games. So he made 2 starts. He played special teams. He played snaps. Savvy Piscatelli factors into that formula because he was a 16-game contributor and he was a free agent signee. When you put it all together, the acquisitions outweighed the losses for the Chiefs. So no comp picks for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2012. However, 2013 might be a different story. The Chiefs have already lost Kyle Orton to free agency. They've already lost LaRon McClain to free agency, and they've already lost Brandon Carr to free agency. Of course, the Chiefs have picked up some free agents as well, but only Peyton Hillis and Brady Quinn count towards the 2013 formula. Because Eric Winston was released by the Houston Texans before he hit free agency, he doesn't count. Because Kevin Boss was released by the Raiders before free agency, he doesn't count. Because Stanford Routt was released by the Raiders before free agency, he also doesn't count. It has to be a player whose expiring contract and hit free agency naturally that qualifies you for those compensatory picks. These players were cut for salary cap reasons by their old clubs, so those Chiefs gains do not count towards their formula in 2013. A lot of confusion yesterday as I tried to explain that process and the formula, which I won't even give you the full formula. It is very confusing. Over Twitter, hopefully you tuned into this show and can get the rundown. Let's get straight to the NFL Network and what they said over the weekend. The question, state of the franchise, can the Chiefs win with Matt Castle in 2012?
Sweep right, Charles trying to attack the angle, is shoved out and appears to be hurt.
Juggling catch is made. He tipped it to himself.
The inconsistent play that the team had experienced really throughout the season made today the right day to do it.
Green Bay goes down in a sea of red. The Green Bay Packers will be perfect no more.
Romeo's now head coach as we check out the state of the franchise. We do the Kansas City Chiefs now. This is presented by Dodge. Notable additions as we move through the offseason. Eric Winston, Stanford Routt, former Raider Kevin Boss, Peyton Hillis, Madden Coverboy, Brady Quinn. I'll take former Browns who have never been in my kitchen, please, for $500. All right. Can they, Jamie Dukes, they being the Kansas City Chiefs, win, including all those guys we saw there, with Matt Castle? That's the question.
Well, unfortunately, they went after the wrong Peyton. They accidentally signed the wrong guy because I don't believe they can win. And part of it has to do with I look at the structure from the top. And the offense coordinator is Brian Daboll. And if you, well, just don't take it from me. This is the track record we're talking about. And so I don't know how they're going to improve. And Castle hasn't been the same since Charlie Weiss left. 4-7. 56% completion, averaging 173 yards, not 273, not 253, 173 yards a game passing, 10 touchdowns, 14 INTs, a passer rating of 65.
All right, he's getting Charles back. He's getting Mo Iaki back. He's going to have weapons.
He had weapons before. Those guys were
not
healthy.
Last year. They all get hurt.
No. When Charlie Weiss was there, they were there, and the brakes came off. I mean, soon as that thing happened. And so as I look at it, and Matt Castle's a great kid again, and that's the one thing about it. But the reality is that he's a manager. That's what he is. He's not, and you can't, I'm sorry, a little more scientific for you. You know, we have all these passer ratings. This is the Dukes fan passer rating. If every time your quarterback drops back and you go, ah! You got no chance of winning the Super Bowl. That's what happens when every time Matt Castle drops back. So
before we pay the bill, can you do that one more time, please?
That's the Dukes fan passer rating for those of you paying attention.
With sound effects, ladies and gentlemen, that is the state of the franchise. The Kansas City Chiefs, presented by Dodge.
Josh Looney back with you on Chiefs Live alongside voice of the Chiefs, Mitch Hollis. And Mitch, you just watched the video I just watched, and it's the NFL Network Talking Heads, Jamie Dukes, debating whether the Chiefs can win with Matt Castle in 2012. The overwhelming opinion, it seems at least nationally, and really here in some circles locally among Chiefs fans, is no, the Chiefs cannot win with Matt Castle in 2012. First off, your opinion on that. I'll ask you the same question. Can the Chiefs win with Matt Castle in 2012?
Do you remember the old movie Men in Black, late 90s, Tommy Lee Jones, Will Smith, and they put the pin up and you forgot everything? Did somebody put a pin up in front of these guys and they just forgot the 2010 season?
Well,
and actually even the 2011 season where he had 11 touchdowns, 9 picks before he got hurt. I mean, it's a pretty good ratio. Before you go on, they must have forgotten, because I want you to hold that thought, because I've got a clip from the 2010 season with Jamie Dukes, whose thought on Castle hasn't really wavered. But this is before the San Diego Chargers game. The Chiefs are in the middle of the AFC West. And the question is asked, this is 18 months ago, Mitch, the same question but flipped. It's asked, can the Chiefs win without Matt Castle? Debating whether this team could win a game without Matt Castle. Let's take a look at what they were saying in 2010.
Down. Throwing it in. Bo has it. Touchdown, Chiefs.
Castle gets rid of it. Bo, touchdown, Kansas City. Slant route. Bo, touchdown.
11th play of the drive. Bootleg. Castle looking. Castle throws. Caught.
touchdown.
Few quarterbacks are having a better season than Matt Castle. In fact, only the man he used to back up in New England is in the midst of a better touchdown to interception ratio. However, Castle is doubtful against the Chargers as he continues to recover from his Wednesday appendectomy. So Brody Croyle is expected to get the start. What kind of chances do you give KC if he is the guy?
I would say nearly zero. It just makes him one-two-way dimensional. And that dimension's fantastic, Jamie. I mean, they're the #1 rushing offense in the league. They average 175 yards per game on the ground. The Chargers had it run on them for 251 last week by the Raiders, but I'm sure they've tweaked some things. They'll have that locked up. They'll play 9-man fronts and force Brody Croyle to beat them over the top, and I don't think he can do it.
So not even 18 months of separation. Same channel, Mitch. Same analyst.
Same dudes.
And if the question is, can the Chiefs win without Matt Castle? And I think that's where you're going in the 2010. Yes, it wasn't a great season for Matt last year. He was injured. But it seems that the year that he had his running game and all of his targets has been completely zapped from the mind of many as the Chiefs move forward towards 2012.
And there's a better receiving core in 2012, ostensibly, with Dwayne Bowe, with Steve Breston, with Jonathan Baldwin. That's a better receiving core than Matt has had at any time during his career here. Better than 9, better than 10, better than 11. So, and with Moeaki coming back, you add Kevin Boss to the mix. You get Jamal Charles back. You got Peyton Hillis to add to the mix. You look to be better on the offensive line with Eric Winston. Sometimes this business is like politics, and I've spent every week, probably since Matt has been hurt or since the end of the regular season, in some way, shape, or form publicly defending Matt Castle, particularly when the whole Peyton Manning stuff came up. But honestly, I will stand here and defend him. I'll take shots on Twitter. I'll take the hits. I'm going to defend him. And this will be his best cast that he has had since he's been quarterback of the Kansas City Chiefs. So bring it on. Let it fly.
You've taken a very public stance in support of Matt Castle. I've backed him as well, not as deep as you have. I've been under the impression, I've always said, when the Chiefs have a solid run game, Matt Castle is a fantastic quarterback, but he needs a run game to be successful. I don't think he's a guy who's going to throw it all over the yard and win you a football game. I think he can win you a championship. I think he's a good enough quarterback to do that with the right parts around him. Of course, that was taken away last year, and I think he was exposed a little bit, but the Chiefs struggled to protect him as well. He got hit on the game he got injured, Mitch. I counted. It was about 20 times he took hits in that game against the Broncos. Few quarterbacks are going to have a chance to succeed when they're not being protected. I think 2010, and people can talk about the schedule all they want and the Chiefs' easier schedule, 2010 is a blueprint of what this Chiefs offense wants to be. They want to be able to run the football and have a run game and the ability to keep people off balance. And Matt Castle is a smart player. He's a talented player who can run as well. I think if all things are clicking, which you would hope in 2012, because he has a better roster in 2012 than he did in 2010. Obviously not last year with the injuries he had with Baldwin and Charles. I do think the way the Chiefs are built, Matt Castle can win in this system. I'm not saying he's a top 10 quarterback, and I'd even argue he's may not even be in the top 15 quarterback. But for the Chiefs offense, the way they're built, I think he is a player who can win and be effective for Kansas City.
I'm going to take it. I think he is a top 15 quarterback, and I think he has the ability to possibly crack into the top 10. Now, you name a quarterback who has won this league consistently without a semblance of a run game. Even Peyton Manning, look at the runners he had with Edgerrin James and Marshall Faulk and going right down the line, Joseph Adai. But I know that he can do it 75% pass. Tom Brady might be the best example of doing it without a big-time running game. But he's had enough of a running game. It's not like it's been non-existent in New England. The same with Drew Brees. They've been able to run the ball enough, and Drew Brees is the best play-action passer, I think, maybe in the National Football League. Yes, are there things that Matt can continue to work on? Sure. But I've seen enough, and I'm going to go back to when I saw him go the length of the field to win games. It is something that had not been done here by a Chiefs quarterback. Gerbach did it against the Oakland Raiders on Monday Night Football. But honestly, that's something, don't overlook the fact he's taken this team repeatedly, either go down to get field goals or touchdowns to win or tie games. That is really hard to do, and he did it without much of a cast. Now all of a sudden he's going to have the best group around him he's had as a Chief. And I mentioned, okay, he had those guys last year at the beginning of the year. Well, he never had Baldwin. He didn't have him for 6 weeks. So basically when Baldwin came into play, he gets hurt. There was a very little window where Matt Castle had all the weapons. And Kevin Boss had a second tight end. You and I talked about it last week, who can catch and block. and the offensive line is going to be better, in my opinion. So I just don't get it where Matt Castle now is awful and can't win football games with him or win a championship.
Yeah, that's the shocking part to me. And really, you said maybe top 10. Maybe you and I disagree on that. But what we both agree on, I think, is for whatever reason, he has become viewed nationally and locally in some sort of as a bottom 5 quarterback in this league, as 25 through 32 or 28 through 32. And I don't see that at all. Even when he's struggled with the Chiefs. Take 2009 when he was throwing to Bobby Wade and that cast of characters. I still don't think he was in the bottom 5 in the league, even with that group, learning a new system. He's gone through a lot of coordinators. I think Matt Castle has received a lot of heat this offseason. I think it may have been escalated because of Peyton Manning's availability that came up and the Chiefs' interest in Peyton Manning. And, of course, Peyton Manning's Peyton Manning. I mean, you get a chance to get Peyton Manning, that's a risk I think every fan base and really every front office is willing to take for 1 year if you're able to get out of that contract if he's hurt. It's Peyton Manning. You're talking about one of the all-time greats in league history. And I think that escalated kind of the bullseye on Matt Castle's back because of Peyton Manning and the fact that Matt got hurt, and then you had Kyle Orton come in and he showed the strong arm. He's got the strong arm everyone else. Even though Orton did only have 1 touchdown and 2 interceptions, he managed the game. People saw that. They saw the arm strength. They liked it. I think it all kind of came and pinpointed on Matt, and he's taken much more criticism this year than really he deserves. I think it's just escalated to levels beyond what I could even agree with, to be honest with you.
The question, let's boil this down to the least common denominator, and that is, can he win a postseason game, which has not been done here since 1993. That's the trump card you put on any discussion you have about this franchise. And my answer is yes, I think he can. And the question by the fans is, can he do more than that? Well, it remains to be seen. But until you get the first one, this discussion sometimes becomes moot, because if you keep everybody together and you keep this defense together, which we think is going to be rock solid, if not spectacular, and you give him a better offensive cast around him, better offensive line, yes, he can win postseason game and maybe games. Let's just let this play out and let this guy play.
Yeah, the last quarterback to win a playoff game for the Chiefs, Joe Montana.
Exactly.
Trent Green has had a great career and then was unable to win a game. And you're right. That at the end of the day is the barometer, and I think Matt Castle has the tools to do it. The other part of the argument, a new piece of the pie, and I was kind of surprised to see this. Jamie Dukes brought in Brian Daboll into question, who has yet to call a play for the Chiefs. Not in practice, not in a game, and not anywhere. Brian Daboll is yet to call a play for the Chiefs and is already being labeled as a problem in Kansas City. You saw his league rankings. They were, I believe, 32nd, 29th, and 22nd as a coordinator. I would go and look at that and say, number one, look at the quarterbacks he was working with. Cleveland, no one's been successful. He was also, that's where he grinded his teeth. It was his first 2 years as a coordinator. I'm also under the belief that Brian Daboll is and coordinators, as you go year 1, year 2, year 3, it's like a quarterback. It's like a defensive lineman. You become better. We're getting him now, Mitch, in year 4 of being an offensive coordinator. He knows his system. He's comfortable in his system, and he knows what he wants to do. He's called plays. We saw Miami's success after an awful start last year. They were one of the best offenses in the league over the second half of the 2011 season. He's going to mix it up. He's going to do a lot of things. And I'll admit, when the Chiefs first hired him, I had to dig through. And it's like, tell me, I didn't know a whole lot about Brian Daboll. The more I've talked with him here in the office, the more I've met with him. He's got a clear vision. I like what he brings. I think the Chiefs are going to see some exciting offense. He's not afraid to switch things up and run some of the trick plays, run some of the different offense one week that maybe you didn't see the week before. And we saw with Miami what he did to us last year, out scheming even Romeo Crennel at times with the use of Charles Clay and screening linebackers and getting mismatches. I'm actually excited about Brian Daboll, and I think looking at the past may not be completely fair to him as far as the rankings of his offenses in 3 seasons with Cleveland and Miami.
I keep tweeting this, and it's the quote from the movie Hoosiers, and it's from Norman Dale: "My team is on the floor." Let this guy coach. Let me give you some other statistics about Brian Daboll and the Miami Dolphins, which goes beyond the obvious when you look at total offense, which you've got to look at some other things. You don't just look at total offense in the yards you should produce in a single game. I'm going to go with Troy Aikman here. Let's go into beyond the stats. Here's one. 44 points by the Miami Dolphins last year in first offensive possessions. That's top 6 in the league. What does that tell you, Josh? that tells me about game planning. That's a game planning thing. That's a Tuesday stat to me, which is a positive stat. And with 44 points in their first offensive possessions would be a big, if he can replicate that with Kansas City, it'd be a big move forward. 4.24 a rush, big plus. They had a 76-yard touchdown, Reggie Bush. 58 10-plus runs, which is near the top of the league. Red zone. I'm going to talk about red zone from now until the Chiefs play their opening game of the season. Last year, 53 red zone possessions. Brian Daboll had 25 touchdowns, way ahead of what the Chiefs were able to do, and very respectable in the league. 16 red zone touchdown passes to 7 different receivers. Okay? And I'll tweet all this so everybody can kind of chew on it. I'm just saying there's some stats beyond the stats that make you appreciate Brian Daboll much more. And I like the fact that Daboll was very imaginative against Kansas City. All you got to do is go back and watch that tape, and you mentioned using Clay. Also, Fasano, he was able to get the Chiefs in some coverages and some personnel packages where they were able to use Fasano to get big plays out of their second tight end, essentially, or their 1B tight end. And it gets a little sensitive because Romeo was on the defensive side of this. Out-schemed, out-flanked. They cut us up, basically, in that game.
I think Romeo would tell you that.
And he would tell you that. It's part of the reason maybe he wanted to bring him back. But he's been with him before. But let's let this guy coach, too. And I think it's ridiculous for the NFL Network to say, well, let's look at his total offensive stats, and this guy can't coach. There's some other stats to look at if you dig a little deeper to show you that there may be hope that Daboll can be successful here in Kansas City.
Absolutely. The thing I like that he did with the Dolphins, Mitch, you look at the Dolphins' playmakers and what he had, and I think the Chiefs have better playmakers overall, but it's pretty similar in some ways. You had a number 1 receiver, a Pro Bowl receiver in Brandon Marshall, who was your guy, and here you have Dwayne Bowe. Okay? You had a scat back, a fast running back, who's not as talented as Jamal Charles and Reggie Bush, but had a career year with Daboll. You had your power back, who's not as talented, or you could argue the talent's there, but he's not experienced and polished as Peyton Hillis and Daniel Thomas from Kansas State. So you look at some of the skill positions, and they mirror a little bit with the Chiefs.
Devon Best is kind of Steve Breaston.
Yeah, and
where's the same number?
And the Chiefs are a little bit further down in the process than Miami. And of course, Matt Moore, Chad Henne, I don't think either one of them are around Matt Castle's ability. Certainly in Cleveland, Colt McCoy is not, and Brady Quinn's here to be a backup. He started 9 games for Daboll in 2009 with the Cleveland Browns. And you and I talked about it, Mitch, about needs going forward. Let's look at, you talk about the guys being out for the Chiefs last year and Matt having to deal with that. Let's think of the ability to play 4 wide receivers last year for half the season. There was none. The Chiefs could not spread the ball. You had to have Leonard Pope and Anthony Becht or Jake O'Connell in there at all times, and because there was a shortage. Kerry Colbert, who was cut midseason, was your slot receiver. You're essentially your starting slot. The Chiefs didn't run a whole lot of multiple sets, but you had Baldwin or Breaston outside and Bowe outside, and Kerry Colbert was your slot. If it wasn't him each week, it was Jeremy Urban, who caught 4 passes and is now an unrestricted free agent who remains unsigned. When Baldwin came back, he was behind the 8 ball, learning the mix, but also playing oddly, and I don't know if the Chiefs are going to do this year with him. He was playing inside. He was playing a lot of slot, and Breaston remained outside with Dwayne Bowe. There's a need for depth at receivers, what I'm getting at. Terrence Copper's a good special teams guy. He's not a slot either. He played on the outside, and you remember when Bowe missed a meeting late in the season, Copper started outside for Dwayne Bowe. The Chiefs kind of have an issue with slot ever since they moved Dexter McCluster to the backfield, and if he remains a running back in Daboll's offense, there's a need to add a receiver. There's obviously, we talked about the offensive line. There's a need for a swing tackle. You need a good guy who can be in the reserves to play the other positions. Fullback's an issue that the team is going to still have to tackle. And backup quarterback, before we wrap up the Matt Castle talk, the question was, and I think it still is, Mitch, and we gave our opinion on Quinn. I like Quinn. I think he has a chance to succeed. But if Matt Castle gets injured, has an appendectomy, it breaks his hand, whatever it may be. He has not played 16 games in the season with the Chiefs for whatever reason. There was a knee injury in the preseason in 2009, had the appendectomy, emergency appendectomy in 2010, and last year with the broken hand. If Castle is out, can Brady Quinn or Ricky Stanzi or whomever gets the number 2 job win the Chiefs a game? Because that was the debate when Matt Castle went out in 2010. Brody Croyle was up, and you heard the talking heads, 0% chance they gave Kansas City without Matt Castle and Brody Croyle in San Diego. Can Brady Quinn be a guy Can Ricky Stanzi be a guy that the Chiefs can lean on if Castle gets hurt?
That's the postulate for a backup quarterback. That's the definition of a backup quarterback. And now in the NFL, you can almost extend it. Can they win 2 games? But Quinn has been able to win games in the National. He has won a game in the National Football League. Is he better than Tyler Palko? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay. Is he better than Brody Croyle? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. The point is.
Although I would have rather had Brody Croyle than Tyler Palko.
Okay, but Brody didn't win a game.
No.
Palko wins one.
But who's going to?
You know, Hail Mary.
Okay, you.
But no. I'm not. I'm just saying Quinn's better than all those guys.
Yes, for sure.
So to fit your postulate, yes. I mean, he fits the role of what you got to have in a backup quarterback. Even looking at the Chiefs' history, people think '93 was all Joe Montana. He's just rocking it all day long. Look what Dave Craig had to do that year.
That's right.
Even the Chiefs' World Championship season in 1969, 4 quarterbacks played that year. 3 started. I mean, Lenny spent a lot of the year hurt, almost worked on his knee and thought he wasn't ever going to play again. We kind of forget about things in revisionist history. Yes, you've got to have a backup quarterback. The Chiefs are better at this position now than they've been in a long time at this spot, in my opinion.
Yeah, the draft order became official. I said it last week. I don't think the Chiefs are necessarily done at quarterback either. I don't think that Brody Croyle, I'm going to say that a lot because it kind of has the same name.
Brady Quinn. Yeah.
I don't think Brady Quinn is for sure the number 2 guy right now. Stanzi's going to get an opportunity to beat him out. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs draft another quarterback as well. The draft order comes out. The Chiefs have 8 picks. They have pick number 11 in the first round. They've got a second-round pick, number 44. They move up in the rounds. One because of New Orleans' penalties and getting the picks taken. So then the 3rd round, they have the 74th pick, the 107th overall in the 4th, 146th in the 5th, 182nd in the 6th. And they have 2 7th rounds, pick 218. And then finally, pick number 238 from New England, way back in the Jared Page trade that seems that it was eons ago. The Chiefs are going to cash in on a 7th rounder late on draft day for
Let's go back to your
Jared
4th wide
Page.
receiver thing because going through all
you can
these
find
picks,
him in one of those.
Right. That's the point.
Yep.
And it's become a 4 wide receiver league, or at least to have that in your repertoire. The Green Bay Packers are the epitome of this. They put 4 great wide receivers on the field. If it's to their advantage, Josh, to go to 4 wide receivers. Sometimes with a team, if you got a bunch of rock-hard DBs like the Baltimore Ravens back there, or a great pass rushing team, you may not want to go 4 wide receivers, or Aaron Rodgers is out and Gonzo. But at least they have the ability to do that. If the Chiefs, and we've seen Brian Daboll, we talk about the being inventive by Romeo Crennel on defense. If you get a 4th wide receiver, at least gives Daboll that option. And so now he's got an option of using McCluster however he wants, Peyton Hillis however he wants, Jamal Charles however he wants. But a 4th wide receiver that can play like Baldwin, Breaston, and Bo, even find some guy named B, to put in there as a 4th wide receiver is a huge advantage to the Chiefs and Brian Daboll. It just puts one more thing in his database, in his iPad that he can bring up on game day.
If the Chiefs don't sign a guy in the mold of Jericho Cotchery, who was in a visit last week and is unsigned, and I think his mold's perfect. Cotchery is a 3-4 receiver, one of those in your order. He's a slot guy. He replaced Hines Ward. He had a slow start last year. Possession guy. He's a guy you want as your 3rd or 4th receiver. And a guy gets hurt, you're not going to lose much if he has to go and play more. Depth is an issue receiver. But when I look at and put my mock draft out here in about 3 weeks, you're right, Mitch. If we haven't signed a guy in the Cotchery mold, maybe that 4th pick at 107 or the 5th pick at 146. I'll look at a receiver, but I'll find somebody with a B, so we can have 4 Bs instead of 3 Bs. You'd be Bo, Breaston, Baldwin, and new guy. B.
Jamie Dukes will say there's no way you can have 4 Bs as 4
Can't have 2 Bs.
The
killer bees, Houston Astros. How many do they have? Biggio, Bagwell, Berkman.
The real killer bees.
The real killer bees. When we come back on Chiefs Live, we will talk about Dontari Poe and some of the interesting rule changes proposed at this year's owners' meeting. They may have come out with the results of the votes. It should be coming this afternoon. If it's not, we'll go through all of them. If it is, we'll go with the ones that pass. We'll take a break and take a look and be back on Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers.
Together, we are music. Hearts beating to the same drum. We are many, but we are one. Brothers of the sun.
The concert event of the year. Brothers of the Sun Tour. Superstars Kenny Chesney, Tim McGraw. With Grace Potter and the Nocturnals and Jake Owen. Tickets are on sale now. Presented by Corona Light.
So I'll sit right here and have another beer in Mexico. It's summertime. Sweet summertime.
The new Chiefs team store is located on the Founders Plaza on the north side of the new Arrowhead Stadium. Open on game days and from 10 to 6 Monday through Saturday throughout the season, the team store has the largest selection of Chiefs merchandise in the Kansas City area. Featuring official sideline apparel from Reebok, and you can shop 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at kcchiefs.com.
Welcome back to the second half hour of Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers, Josh Looney, Mitch Holthus. And before we get into some draft talk and some rule talk, Mitch, a couple things on the agenda for Chiefs fans. This Thursday, for those of you in the Pacific Northwest, the Chiefs 65 TPT crew, Joe Dane Masad, the producer, Rob Alperino, Vice President Media and Marketing, will be at Stan's Barbecue in Issaquah, Washington. We're filming some special features for our upcoming fall lineup. And there's some freebies involved, free appetizers. I don't know, it might give you a free beer or something too. I don't know exactly what Stan has in mind. But information on our Facebook page. This Thursday, if you're up in the Seattle area, if you're watching from there from 5 to 8 p.m. at Stan's, it's a Chiefs party, an off-season get-together, if you will. All you gotta do is wear red, and you've got freebies. Go to facebook.com/Kansas City Chiefs for all the details and plugs there. Also, Mitch, this is what I'm looking forward to. I'm going to New York next week, Monday through Wednesday. Our live show will be moved to Thursday, and I'll put a reminder up online for everyone. For what Brad Young, I can't steal it. He's going with me. What he views, he says, going to be some Tony Stark Iron Man type stuff. We are going to be at the official Nike launch of the uniforms, the merch, the whole thing in New York City. We'll be there with Dwayne Bowe. We'll get you a look at all the Chiefs gear, the new jerseys, the new sideline stuff, everything. And Nike's blowing this thing out. We'll be there. We'll talk to Dwayne Bowe. He'll be modeling the Chiefs stuff. I really don't know much about it. We were just talking about we don't really have an itinerary. Nike's been so hush-hush about it. We just know they're going to blow this thing up. It'll be like Transformers coming out, and Tony Stark will be in his doing his thing. But so take a look all next week also on KCChiefs.com. We're going to blow you out with all the new Nike gear. And then when we come back on Thursday, we'll talk about our trip and maybe show you some interviews with Tony Stark and Iron Man as well.
Yeah, that ought to be good. Now, a couple of things. Let's go.
I just had a tweet from a guy who said, I am so excited about Nike. Can you leak anything to me? People are excited about this. I'm excited about this. Changing from the
Let's
Reebok
deal that in
touchdown.
let's deal that in a second. Let's go back to Issaquah, Washington.
Okay,
One, there's a couple of things. One, we got scoreboard over the Seahawks after the 2010 victory, and they says the 12th man flag. No, scoreboard. We've
Matt
annexed
Castle, 3 or 4 touchdowns.
That's right, and with no Brandon
Richardson,
Albert.
left tackle.
He had to play left tackle, right? So the 12th man flag flying on the north end of the stadium where that kind of peak thing is there. No, that's owned by the Chiefs. Secondly, birthplace. That's right. The Voices' birthplace right there, Tacoma, Washington. So you can celebrate. I'll have my birth certificate there on hand from 1975 that you can look at when I was born, 77, I think, 87. And you can look at it. So anyway, that's cool. Now let's go back. Tell me that our uniforms are not going to look like Baylor's basketball uniforms.
All I know
Can you tell me that? I know it's a different company. I'm not going to mention it.
Here's the deal with Nike. They don't let you know anything.
Yeah,
They won't let me know anything because they don't want anything leaking out. Those mocks that everyone saw with the arrowheads and crazy, I know for a fact those aren't them. Those are a fan having fun. And I remember a lot of people came to me. They thought that those were the mocks, and some people were like, these are awesome. People were like, they're ruining everything. You know, there was like no arrowhead on it. It was like, you know, an Indian, almost like Florida State looking thing, if I remember right. You're going to have the arrowhead on the helmets. It's not. I don't think. What do I know?
Is this like Oregon? Does it change every week?
No, I don't think it's going to be crazy. I know what I've been told is that Nike has new uniforms for each of the 32 teams. How significantly different? I don't know. That's what I'm excited to find out. But I don't think it's going to be
Maryland.
big.
I know that's another company. I'm not going to mention them either. It's just like Maryland, where you scramble the egg right on top of that.
The NFL is a more of a traditional league, and I mean, maybe you'll have something crazy like the Broncos go back to wearing orange or something all the time. There may be stuff like that. But
They're going to wear whatever Peyton Manning wants them to.
Right. I think you might have better fits in the glossy stuff, and you know how basketball jerseys have gone to the Tide, and maybe some college football. I think some of that might be part of it, but I just don't see like wild uniforms. The league is too traditional for me to see that. Some teams may be willing to change more than others, but the Kansas City Chiefs, the Pittsburgh Steelers, the New York Giants, the Dallas Cowboys, those teams aren't going to the Chiefs aren't probably going to be wearing bright neon Baylor jerseys, and the Steelers aren't going to be wearing all gold, I wouldn't think.
I'm bringing up college references, but you know Alan Pellegrino is on our 65 TPT crew, very talented dude. Has Penn State changed their uniform since 1887? The answer is no, and there's a reason they haven't done that, okay? It's part of their branding. Now, I love Nike getting a hold of this, but this is a great part and a great brand for the Kansas City Chiefs.
I'd be shocked to see this thing change right here. And
do not change.
But what do I know? I guess we'll find out next week. Check KCChiefs.com. We'll have it covered from start to finish with exclusive interviews from New York, the show, the launch, Dwayne Bowen modeling everything. It'll be pretty cool.
But you'll be trendy. You're going to be in New York. You're going to be hanging out.
I'll be trendy, man. I'll be trendy.
Pitbull's going to hang with you a little bit.
And Brad, of course, made sure our flight came back a little later the next day so we could have some time in the city.
He learned from the master, Rob Alvarado.
That's right. I learned from the master, Rob Alvarado. So keep in that, and again, go to our Facebook page if you're interested in going to just a random Chiefs party in the middle of season in Issaquah, Washington at Stan's Barbecue. We had a big pep rally there before the Seattle game. It was awesome. Stan took care of us, and he's going to take care of Chiefs fans again this coming week. Mitch, let's get into rule proposals, and there's a number of them. We're going to highlight some significant ones that are up for proposal. They should be coming in the finalization of these votes today, because the owners and the GMs and the coaches got to hit the golf course in Palm Beach at some point. I'm serious. They're like all business, but then that really last back half of the day, you got to go golf. Get your game of golf.
It's kind of like the 65 TPT crew.
Yeah, let's go to New York. Only we eat deep dish pizza. That's the. So we'll take a look. The rule proposals up. There's several. The first one proposed by Buffalo is number 1, and that's Buffalo proposes the replay official in the booth make all decisions in the booth as opposed to the referee. I don't see why that wouldn't pass. It makes sense from time, and it just eliminates the middleman. Have the booth guy make the call. Tell the referee you don't have to go in and look in the. I think it would eliminate looking at the play inside the screen when we see it. It would save time. Your thoughts on that proposal?
Well, this is kind of a college rule. This is what the college does, basically. They just buzz the official. He doesn't go look at video. He just puts on the headset and say, hey, we got an issue here, and it looks like we need to change it, blah, blah, blah. Initially, the referees were always kind of a little ouchy with this. When the replay rule first came out, saying you're taking some authority away from us on the field, but I think we're way past that now. So this, to me, is a very positive move forward.
Yeah, I think so. Remember, these are proposals. These have not been voted on yet. These are what owners are discussing. As to have, I believe it's a 2/3 or 75% vote to pass. Last year, the big news was when they moved the kickoffs up to the 35-yard line. That was the big rule change. There's some other significant ones, though, and I think the bylaws are pretty interesting as well. Proposal 2 was also, or actually, this was proposed by Pittsburgh, a modification to the horse tackle rule. It's a 15-yarder if you horse tackle someone with a horse collar. There's a rule in there where if a quarterback is inside the pocket and tackled by a horse collar, it's illegal, which is shocking to me because you can't really touch quarterbacks anymore in the NFL, but apparently you can horse collar them. They would have that added protection to the quarterback. Look, it's already a rule for everybody across the field. I wouldn't see why this wouldn't pass. You don't see quarterbacks tackled that much by the horse collar anyway. I don't think it's a significant change, and I think it's more or less just wording and kind of something that's passed through. Your thoughts? Probably something that's going to pass, I would think.
No, it's a loophole. And, I spend a lot of my evenings at training camp going through the NFL rule book, which is like learning Mandarin Chinese sometimes, and there's so many this and that. But the horse collar tackle is one of the most devastating plays in football. It can be a career ender.
You can tear Achilles. You can, injure the back. You can injure the upper part of the back. I mean, it's one of the most positive moves to just eliminate that tackle from any part of the game.
Rule Proposal 3, also proposed by Pittsburgh, one that I've been in favor of. In fact, I wish that they just go to the college rules, but at least they made the postseason modification to overtime where everyone should get a possession unless the offense drives all the way down and scores a touchdown. Basically eliminates the short field, the 60-yard Seabass field goal, and the game's over without touching the football. That's the way there is in the postseason, which, you want to talk about bounties, I believe it was constructed after that rule, the overtime rule. Didn't that game go in overtime between Minnesota and the NFC Championship, Minnesota and New Orleans? I think that this rule was based off of that game, not having a Super Bowl team not get a chance to possess in overtime, which that game's become infamous for other reasons with the Saints penalties and the bounties. But overtime, I believe, was kind of constructed off of that game as well. I don't see why you wouldn't do this, and it's been tested for postseason. Just implement it throughout regular season games.
If you think I'm old school about the uniform thing, I have fought old school on this rule for years, and people have looked at me like I'm some kind of idiot. No, I wouldn't mind seeing the college rule adopted. Either start at the 50 or the midfield and figure it out where it's not timed and just let it go. But this is the only professional sport where both teams don't get a chance. In soccer, if you got penalty kicks or shootouts, don't both teams get a chance? Basketball, both teams get a chance. Baseball, both teams get a hit. This is the overtime rule in the NFL is one of the dumbest things in all of professional sport, and hopefully this can help eliminate that.
Yeah, most definitely. I'm with it 100%, and I'd actually be surprised to see if that one doesn't pass. Number 4, we'll skip. It's a cleanup rule, another modification. Number 5, adapt to too many men on the field. This is modeled after the Super Bowl, where the Giants were able to basically take the option. And now they want to make it, if you have too many men on the field, there's 12 men, it's a dead ball foul. No time runs off. It is a 5-yard penalty. Discuss the play in the Super Bowl, Mitch.
Well, you can bring it up and talk about it. But, yeah, listen, there's so much situational substituting now, and the NFL is way more substituting now than ever before. Kind of goes back to what we talked about before the break. 4 wide, 3 wide. Then the offense declares trump, basically, and then the defense has to sub to that package. You can be somewhat tricky and manipulative with that. We saw that in the Super Bowl. If it makes it a dead ball foul, it stops the game. Because actually guys have been fooled in the NFL, Josh, where the college rule is, I believe it is a dead ball foul.
It is. They're adapting the college rule.
So you'll see defensive guys sometimes that'll stop thinking it's a dead ball foul, and then the play continues. And that can lead to all kinds of issues. So I'm all about it. I think this is another. The NFL for years has been real slow to adopt the college rules to their game. Now they need to see me more open than ever. The colleges have also looked at the NFL and said there's some things we can do. But I think this is a very positive rule. Make it a dead ball foul. Don't give an advantage, and play on.
This one will pass unanimously, I believe. The situation was 2nd and 10 with 17 seconds left. The Patriots were trying to come back, had the ball on the 44-yard line. Ran a play, took several seconds off the clock. The Giants were penalized for 12 men on the field. It had no impact on the play. It was kind of running off like a sub, but he was still on the play. The Giants had no real advantage, but the idea is that the team could simply put 12 men on the field to keep a team from making a play with only a 5-yard penalty to pay for that. So this is more of a modification, and I'm surprised it hasn't been exposed.
Well, you don't lose the time. If it's a dead ball foul, you blow it dead, no
if
time runs off the clock.
If you're the defensive team, the whole point is you can milk some clock, take some time, and do that type of thing for only a 5-yarder, and have the advantage of playing with 12 men while time runs off the clock. It would be a dead ball foul. A defense can't really gain that advantage. Expansion on defensive players. This is dealing with crackback blocks.
This is huge to me.
I think it's great.
This is huge to me.
The defender and me, thank you.
Is this not Eric Berry?
It is Eric Berry.
Stevie Johnson.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
As a defender, I think the college defensive player match, the quarterback's protected, offensive players protected, and linemen are protected inside from chop blocks. But who's not protected, and their vicious hits, are crackback blocks from wide receivers to defensive backs and linebackers. Concussions come from ear hole hits, which now you have the helmet-to-helmet can't happen. But you have injuries on these plays. You have season-ending injuries that Stevie Johnson had a crackback block downfield that cut down Eric Berry. It's one of the most dangerous plays in football. And if you're going to protect the offense and you're going to protect the defensive line, to completely not protect guys like Eric Berry, it doesn't make any sense. I really hope this rule passes. I don't know if it will or not, but it makes perfect sense to protect defensive backs and linebackers as well.
No single play has incensed me more in my time in the league than that play by Stevie Johnson on Eric Berry. If it had been flipped, and you know, Buffalo was somewhat defensive of that, and they're saying, well, it was like a quarter of an inch, it was legal. I said, show that play and all the other 30 locker rooms in the National Football League. Take Kansas City and Buffalo out of it. You show that play to the other 30 teams in the league, and you're going to hear a lot of booing and hissing in the league. I mean, you play college football. If you're a defensive back or a linebacker that plays on the outside in space, what do you fear more than anything else? Being cut at the knees on a crackback block. You can't see it. And if you look back, Eric's following the play. So they're saying, well, he should have saw the guy coming. Well, he's not going to stand with his shoulders completely facing line of scrimmage if the play is to my right, as you view it, I guess, on your left, and I'm looking over here and I turn my body at a 45-degree angle, which is precisely what happened on the play. If we're going to protect players, and as I looked at that rule, you can't hit him upside the head, but you've got to hit him above the waist, basically, in a crackback block, which is the way it should be. Because that single play, I mean, that's like the Ben Davidson spearing Lenny Dawson back in the day. This one just fried me because, to me, it showed an inconsistency in the National Football League in protecting players and keeping our guys on the field, taken away from illegal hits.
Hey, you know, I always have the view it's all or nothing. Receivers are defenseless. Quarterbacks are defenseless. All these guys are defenseless. But the guys who are having to modify the way they tackle the DBs are often indefenseless. They are defenseless in
Eric Berry
that
was
spot.
defenseless
He was
on
defenseless.
that play.
Right. So,
because he can't sit there and look, I've got to face the play because I'm thinking about pursuing the play, and now all of a sudden I can't see Stevie Johnson coming to cut me where I can defend myself. He was defenseless on the play.
Protection for those guys, I think,
unanimously.
is important. The final rule proposal is to treat traditional turnovers, key turnovers, much like the league treats scoring, where it's an automatic review. I don't know how that will expand the game or not in the time frame. We'll see if that passes. The bylaws, Mitch, are almost just as interesting to me as you go through here in the procedures and the bylaws. The proposal number one is a cleanup rule. With the way the waivers work, Christmas and Thanksgiving. I'll skip through that one. That's not as significant. It's just basically matching other night games and when you can make decisions and when you can't decision. Proposal number two, move the trade deadline to week 8 of the regular season. I like that. I think week 6 is a little early. It hurts teams' ability to make trades. Baseball is essentially halfway through the year. They have their trade deadline. Like most sports, the NFL, you have 10 weeks of the year, 11 weeks of the year after week 6, and all of a sudden you can't trade if someone has been hurt. There was the issue, if you remember, with Oakland. They scrambled to get Carson Palmer and paid a premium to get him because the trade deadline was coming up on that Tuesday or whenever they made the move. And this would give teams a little extra time. I think it makes sense. Make it halfway through the year after week 8, and it's an extra 2 weeks.
To me, it's perfect because it gives you 2 more weeks to see what happens to your roster and if you lose guys to injury. Anything later than that, though, becomes a little bit of an issue from a competition standpoint because I can help you win, basically, by giving you or making a trade like week 12 that could be unfair from a standpoint of if I want to put you in a position to win against somebody from the other conference, so to speak. But I think this is perfect. Good spot, and I would be for that as well.
Number 3 is for a 90-man training camp roster. We had that last year because of out of the lockout. The NFL wanted to give you more bodies. They want that to become permanent. Then what would happen now, you'd have 90 men in training camp where it used to be an 80-man roster. You would have your first cuts coming after week 3 of the preseason. You'd go from 90 to 80. Then 1 more week, final preseason game would be played, and you go down from 80 to 53. This is exactly how it was last offseason. I like it, too, because you can look at more undrafted rookies in this time, this spring ball, this OTA period, which is already condensed with the new CBA. Now you can sign more guys that may be long shots to make the roster. You keep guys healthier that are coming off injuries, such as Eric Berry, Jamal Charles, Tony Moeaki, and you get to increase your scouting efforts as well. I think this one will pass as well because I think teams liked it last year, having 90 men in camp.
Josh, you have to have a developmental system in the National Football League to take NFL Europe out. And I know it was a cost issue, but listen, Major League Baseball's got a developmental system. We've seen the NBA's got the D-League. You've got to have some element where you can develop players. Although not all your players are going to be top 4 draft picks. You got to find the guys and have a conduit to find the free agent that can develop within your system and become a player in the National Football League for the good of the league. It'll make the league better over time. You know, I think there ought to be a spring league where you have regional teams that play a non-expensive schedule, basically, where Kansas City, St. Louis, Dallas, and Green Bay are in the same league, let's say, and you play a developmental 6-game schedule. Something the league has got to do is develop players. The 90-man roster, to me, at least does some of that.
Yeah, no doubt. And we'll skip through as we run time here. We still want to get to a call and also talk about Dontari Poe just a bit. Proposals 4 and 5. Roster limitations, final camp day Friday, Saturday night. We'll skip over there. Number 6 is interesting. I guess you could call it an injured reserve exception for major injury to this designated player. Right now, if Matt Castle's hand injury, he was throwing by the end of the year. Let's say that happened in week 2, Mitch. You've got to make a decision, and the Colts had to do it this year with Peyton Manning. They weren't sure if he was going to miss the whole year or not. You have to make a decision on an injured player early in the season. And if you put him on injured reserve, maybe the playoffs are coming back and you hear that player, yeah, man, I wish I could go. I'm ready. But they're done for the year because in week 2 you had to make the decision. Do I want the extra roster spot or do I hang this injured player on my roster for 9, 10, 11, 12 weeks and it takes up a roster spot? This is a one-man designated player. So,
but it has to be, as I read that, does it have to be on, that player's got to be on your opening day 50 or your opening day roster?
Yeah, so here's the exact quote from Competition Committee Chair Rich McKay. He said, in this case, if the player was on the roster all the way through the first regular season weekend, then you could put that player on injured reserve, designate that player for return, and he could begin practice 6 weeks after he went on the exception list and play in games 8 weeks after he has gone to that list. You could put him on later in the season, but you could take the player, for instance, who was hurt in the preseason, carry him through the first week of the regular season, put him on the list, and bring him back during the year. In layman's terms, Moeaki injures his knee. Let's say it was an MCL strain and not a tear.
ACL,
okay? You keep Tony Moeaki on your roster through the first weekend of the regular season. He eats that spot up in week 1. You put him on this list. 6 weeks later, he's able to practice 8 weeks later, so by game 9, he's eligible to play again. He is your exception. I'm for this rule. It's a little bit different. It's kind of another loophole the NFL has had that doesn't make a lot of sense. And quite frankly, I don't understand why you have a 45-man roster on game day anyway. You have 53 players. Let them all play, too. I don't understand why you have to designate 7 inactives each and every week as well.
I agree with that. But I think this is a positive rule because it does take, let's say, an 8-week injury, like you've said, and doesn't wipe them out for the season. It gives them a chance to come back.
Okay, looks like we lost our call, so we'll continue here with our bylaw number 7, the final one. This is also an exception to the inactive list. It would give each team the right by Friday of each week to designate up to 1 player who could be on an inactive list, and if they're diagnosed with a concussion, they could go on that inactive list. You could then add another player to your roster, and they would stay inactive until you take them off. So you'd have to put them before Friday at 4 p.m., and no time could you have more than 1 player. This is that concussion deal where Tony Moeaki missed 1 game in his rookie year. He got knocked cold by Joe Mays on an onside kick, got his bell rung. This would be a concussion exception. He missed that game, and then he played the next week. Yeah. Well, instead of him just missing that game and making him inactive, maybe you're thin on tight ends. The Chiefs could have signed Anthony Becht to come in and play that week and make that. I don't know if this will pass or not. I think it deals with decreased measures the league's taking on head injuries and not rushing people
And
back.
I'm all about that. And the fact that you've got it, you can't manipulate this rule because the player has to be diagnosed with a concussion. So it's not where you can do a bunch of hocus pocus and work around it. But I think the head injury thing, the league has come a long way in a short time
with this issue, and I think it's all been positive.
We've gone a lot on the monotony of rules, and we're at the end of the show, but, you know, we'll go a little overtime, do a Chiefs Live overdrive for you right here, because I know a lot of you were talking about Dontari Poe at the beginning of the segment. We want to get to him. And Mitch, I guess let's just start off with our overview of Poe. We've got a video. Is this the guy? Let's watch it. Is this the guy for the Chiefs at number 11, like so many people think?
Explosive.
I got chill bumps, my God, that kid can move.
I'm a hard worker. You'll get it all out of me. Every snap, every play, every practice, every day.
Kidding me? So good, doesn't it?
Kidding me? Dontari Poe, defensive tackle, University of Memphis. My explosiveness and my quickness, you know, off the ball, it's probably the best thing about me. And I was taught the most important thing, you know, about a defensive lineman is ball get off, you know, being explosive. I try to use that, you know, every single play. Every time, you know, I'm rushing the passer or run defense. I'm a versatile guy. You know, people think, you know, 345, 350 pounds, you know, I'm a run stopper, you know, which is not completely true. I can't stop the run, but, you know, I do know how to rush the pass as well. Favorite all time is Warren Sapp and John Randall. Aggressive, the quickness, no matter what their size was.
I told you, Swan, here come the ball.
They never limited themselves. You know, they were always, you know, a force to be reckoned with on the field. You know, they had an attitude when they played, and, you know, and it showed. Dontari Poe is a family man. My mom raised me and my brothers by herself. She's hard to work. I know she's my best friend. You know, I can talk to her about anything. Whenever I have a problem, I call Mom at any time. She knows it's always been a dream for me, so anytime I'm succeeding and I'm happy, she loves it. I'm passionate about this game. I love this game. Draft day will be tremendous. The greatest day of my life. I've been playing since I was 14. That became a dream, something that I always thought about. You know, I always wanted to do. You know, that now that it's here, you know, it's kind of almost surreal, but it'll be a dream come true.
So the real question is, Mitch, if Dontari Poe can be the next Warren Sapp, then the Chiefs should take him at 11, no doubt. Can he be that guy? And we know that the Chiefs, every good 3-4 defense has an anchor in the middle. And the one thing the Chiefs haven't found since Scott Pioli came in and Romeo Crennel and they moved to the 3-4, the one thing they haven't been able to address is a long-term solution at nose. You've had Ron Edwards who moved over from a 4-3. You had Kelly Gregg, who was a one-year stopgap. You've got some prospects you hope, but that guy that you know, this is our anchor, this is who we're putting in to be our anchor for the long haul. If the Chiefs draft Dontari Poe at number 11th, it would be the signal that this is our guy. He's going to be our anchor in 2012, 13, 14, you name it, right down the list. He will be the guy. Can he be that guy?
You want the next Warren Sapp. I want the next Vince Wilfork. To me, the question is this the next Vince Wilfork in the National Football League? Because that, in an odd front defense, that becomes your point of definition. You work front to back. And Wilfork, to me, is my favorite zero tech or nose tackle in the entire National Football League. Now, this guy looks like he's got a Wilfork body. The question is, if you look at some of the question marks about Dontari Poe, is the motor. Is the motor there all the time? Which is any question you've got to ask about a defensive lineman in any of the positions, because you're going to give them a lot of money. And you want them to motor for the money and motor all the time. The other thing I'm going to bring up in this discussion, we can talk about it through the time up until the draft. The National Football League, and I think one of the misconceptions that we all can make about Romeo Crennel and his defense is, oh, it's a 3-4 or it's a 4-3. We have seen over the last couple of years, Josh, where Romeo has become a hybrid coach in many ways. Now, depending on down and distance, you'll see an odd front 3-4, traditional 3-4. But how many times last year, now depending on the opponent, what they do offensively, did we see kind of a hybrid that looked like a 4-3 a little bit? So on Dontari Poe, the question I have too, can he play over the nose? Can he also play in a gap? Because there's going to be times in Romeo's defense where he wants it to actually be kind of a 4-3 or a 4-2 nickel,
where this guy now is playing in a gap like a Warren Sapp or a John Randall, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you brought that up. I just wrote about it this weekend, and the title, you can read about it on KCChiefs.com. It says, sub-package personnel becomes more important with Peyton Manning in Denver. The Chiefs last year were around 45, 46%, somewhere in there. It was close to 50. I confirmed that with Coach Cornell in sub-package snaps, where they had 5, 6 defensive backs. Close to half their snaps. You could argue if they held in that, and that's playing with Denver and Tim Tebow twice, where you're basically in your base the entire game.
The whole game.
And your whole season, you're almost 50-50 in sub-package snaps and base defensive snaps. With Peyton Manning taking over for Tim Tebow in Denver, you could argue that the Chiefs' base defense will not be a 3-4 next year because they may run more snaps out of the nickel package and subsets, which is why a guy like Amon Gordon was so important to re-sign because he can play multiple positions for you. Think back when the Chiefs played the Indianapolis Colts in 2010 against Peyton Manning. The Chiefs ran that entire game exclusively nickel and dime. They ran 2 forms of nickel. They had John McGraw. John McGraw played. He was a third safety. I looked back at that game. Played every defensive snap of that game alongside Barry and Lewis. 3 safeties played every snap in that game, plus the nickel corner Javier Arenas played over 50 snaps that game. So what does that tell you? There weren't many defensive linemen on the field. The Chiefs against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers this year. It broke down 81% of the defensive snaps came in sub-package sets. The way this league is going into the passing league, and with Peyton Manning now in Denver, you've got to have defensive backs for, we talked about last week, the nickel, the dime, the extra safety, the extra corner. That aspect of it, how much does that impact not having an anchor in your base defense? Because maybe you get a guy in the second round, maybe you get a guy in the third. Is 11 too high to take a guy when maybe you're going to play 51, 52% of packages where this nose tackle isn't there if he can't play, like you said, in gaps, if he's just a nose tackle?
And if you do that, Josh, and to take your point a step further, if you're going to play a even front instead of an odd front, 3-man front where he's playing over the center to an even front where he's playing in a gap, to do that you have to be able to play screens and draws, and you still have to be able to get enough pressure up the field. Let's just say, let's not make everything about Peyton Manning, but if you're playing Manning, they're going to run draws. They're going to run draws and screens. So I've got to be athletic enough where I play the gap, but I can still stop a screen or draw or influence the play where my linebackers can clean it up and also be able to get a push or press on a quarterback. So in the case of Dontari Poe, if he's going to be the 11th pick, to me, I check off all those lists and say he can do it. Let me give you another guy that's just a little bit interesting. He's not going to be, well, he's maybe not merit, but a guy like Fletcher Cox at Mississippi State. Bigger, taller guy. He's not as big as Dontari Poe, but you look him up. 6'4", about 300, about 298. But Mississippi State did a great job defensively. Okay, I kind of like that team. They're kind of gritty, tough, feisty. They'll take Auburn, LSU, and just pound at them. But a guy like Fletcher Cox can play outside. He can play inside. He's kind of what I'm talking about. So, you know, maybe you get him in a later round. Maybe you trade down, get extra picks, but you get a guy like that that can still accomplish kind of the same thing. If you're going to do that, though, back to your point, you still have to have a guy when you play your base that can be effective in the nose. Don't lose about Gerald Poe. To me is Ricky Stanzi of the defense. We don't know. We don't know. He basically was redshirted all last year. The other thing is
he's a key too.
Is it confusing for Anthony Pleasant when he goes, "Hey Poe," and Dontari Poe and Gerald Poe both come up and like, "Hey, is this a?" You know, do you waste that 1 second of time when you're going, "Hey Poe," and two guys running? Yeah. So I'm just kidding there. But the point is, if you're going to pay a guy first-round money and invest a lot in him and say, this guy is for at least 5 to 7 years, hopefully, an anchor of your middle, can he do other things that Romeo wants him to do? Because Romeo has shown that's the way he wants to play defense.
That'll be interesting debates. I wanted to bring up Dontari Poe a little early, starting next week on Chiefs Live. And next week we'll cover the Nike uniform launch. But really April on KCChiefs.com, it's going to be draft, shoving it down your throat because free agency now is kind of slowing down a little bit. Poe is, just like last year, who was it? The names escape. Was it Phil, was it Taylor? Was that his name from Baylor? That went to Cleveland, that was hot name for the Chiefs. Gabe Carimi was a
Canadian
hot name
guy, right?
For the Chiefs. No, that was the center, whatever. Anyway, we'll be going draft all April long. Poe is the guy who's captured the most attention of Chiefs fans, the most chatter, and I wanted to kind of lead in our April, Mitch, with him. Next week, we might talk a little offensive line because my favorite pick to this day right now is David DeCastro from Stanford, a guy who can do it all for you on the offensive line. And you talk about guys who can play multiple positions and maul people. You're looking at a guy, you may be looking at a Will Shields, a guy who can be an all-pro guy at guard for 10 years or more. There's so many things that factor in, and the thing I like about the Chiefs and the draft this year, last year you knew the team they had to have a wide receiver. They needed to sign one in free agency, then the need was still there when the draft came around. We're getting less and less of these positions now where, yeah, the team needs a nose tackle, but how many sub-package snaps to play? What about Poe? We're getting now to where this roster is evolving, where it can go so many different ways because it's not, they have to have this position and this guy because this team is in dire straits without it. And that's the great thing about the draft.
And it's why people should be a little bit more excited about what happened in free agency or what is happening in free agency than they are. Because every one of those filled a specific need. You just didn't sign a guy to sign a guy because it looked good and, hey, he's a good player. You filled a need with Winston. You filled a need with Route. You filled a need with Quinn. You filled a need with Boss. Those were dire needs. And so, yes, when you look at the draft now, instead of putting up sheetrock, you're kind of spackling cracks. And so that's a good place for this franchise to be in.
Yep, all apologies to our man Gregory Lance. We had some phone issues, and he was waiting patiently as we went through. He said he's a big fan of the voice, big fan of Mitch, and he wanted to talk to you, Mitch. And the call dropped, and they say, Greg, give us a call back on one of the next shows. We were talking rules, and you waited for about 20 minutes, and the call dropped on you. Our apologies, and of course, always ask your question to other Chiefs fans in the chat room as we are live every Tuesday. Of course, next week it's Thursday. I'll offer the reminders. We'll be in New York for the Nike uniform launch. Stay with us on KCChiefs.com. Chiefs Live brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers. Back next week at a different time, same show, different day as we go in to the draft. Another thanks to Mitch Holthus. And I guess before I let you go, Mitch, do you want to comment on Frank Martin and K-State? You're part of that. You know the university well. It's a hot topic in Kansas City. You know Frank Martin well. Do you have a thought and opinion on him going to South Carolina?
Some things transcend, or sometimes college basketball can be like the National Football League. And that is, you have to have a congruent, consistent dialogue and everybody on the same page. It's why 2012 Kansas City Chiefs football is more exciting than it's been in a while because everybody's headed in the same direction. The situation with Kansas State, I think now has been well documented. That was not happening.
Yep.
And so there was frustration on both ends. Who's right, who's wrong, we may never know. It may remain to be seen. History may play that out. But the point here is that was not happening. And I don't care if you play college basketball at the NFL, this is happening now more in collegiate and pro sports than ever because the money's involved. You get a little more personalities involved. But honestly, the people who win, I go back to the Steelers, I go back to the Patriots. You can look at the winning teams in college sports consistently. They have that flow all going in the same way.
Interesting stuff, even for Chiefs fans who aren't necessarily basketball fans, the way some situations mirror one another. We'll be back next week on Chiefs Live, brought to you by your Midwest Ford dealers.